computer. Alrighty. So basically, I went to this conference, this integral conference 2 weeks ago. And after I came back, I was capturing all my insights and clustering them and doing the whole design thinking thing that I like to do. And I was trying to synthesize and crystallize like a list of like 10 principles or something like that out of it. And then I was like, you know what? One of the biggest insights from this is playing together, putting out ideas, co-creating knowledge, co-creating things live in the field. So why don't I just do that process that I was going to do alone and hoard that knowledge and put it in my own, words? Why don't I just do that live with Kev? And why don't we record it and put it out there so that other people can also participate in this process of learning with us? And so with that, that's the intention. So I have no idea, no plans. I just have some ideas here. I'm going to put them out into the field here with Kev, and then we're going to see what emerges from that.
Very good. Very good. Sounds good.
So a few opening things just to create a little container here and bracket some things. Kev, you and I have been playing basically since we were able to play. We were kids at recess in elementary school. And I was thinking today, I was like, wasn't that an amazing time? Like you just come out of your classroom, there's all these other kids, you run on the field, and then some kids like, let's play Foursquare, let's play King of the Hill, let's play XYZ. And it just self-organizes and it's this beautiful thing. And we've been doing that all these years. So, here is just the
Yeah.
next evolution of that.
It's always been like different kinds of play too, whether it be like, I think it's something we've always kind of gravitated towards was characters and stories and sort of like accents and things like that, where it's like it's a lot of like imagination, like falling into a world.
Yeah, yeah. Which makes me think, speaking of characters, I thought that I would put
The
this on
young fool.
the Fool because the costume pulls the archetype down, and let's do it. So, oh, and I had this idea. I had this idea. What if we pull a card from the tarot deck and just see what it is and see if that gives us some like vibe for how we want to do this?
All right, one sec. Let me grab it.
You have one too?
Oh yeah. Oh, I didn't know you were referring to yours.
Oh, no, no, no. Good. That's even better.
We
Yeah,
pulled two.
what? You had it like on hand?
Yeah.
I guess I have mine on hand too.
There we
That's
go.
Oh, this is a fool centric.
Was it blurred?
This is the trickster tarot, right?
Yeah. Um, let's turn off this blur real quick.
Does that one have its own interpretation or is it like the normal?
It's just different artwork.
Okay, great.
So I'm picking one at random. I got two swords.
Two of Swords. Okay, let me look that up. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. Two of Swords. Let's ask GPT. Can you still see my face?
Yeah.
Okay. What is the meaning of the Two of Swords? Two of Swords is a card from the Minor Arcana. Yup. Okay, traditionally, the card depicts a woman blindfolded, sitting with her back to a body of water, holding two crossed swords. The imagery is rich in symbolic elements. The blindfold represents a state of indecision or the need to rely on inner vision rather than external influences. The crossed swords symbolize a conflict, a stalemate, or a difficult decision that needs to be made. The crossing of the swords suggests a balance or a tension between the two opposing forces or choices. And the body of water represents the subconscious mind and emotions. Calm water indicates a state of stillness and the need for introspection. When the Two of Swords appears upright in a reading, it generally signifies the need to make a difficult choice or decision.
Hmm.
the need to balance opposing forces or perspectives, and it basically represents a conflict and having to make a choice and relying
Right.
on intuition, I think, to do so.
Right. But so, I mean, that's an interesting thing. Like, did you ever come to a point at this conference you're just at where like you had to make a choice?
I actually did.
Fair enough.
I actually did. I actually did. I did. Um,
What was that choice?
this is amazing. Actually, this takes us right into the thing that I was kind of avoiding talking about because I didn't know how publicly I wanted to discuss it, but I think we can play with it and see what happens. Um, the choice was, do I lean in? The choice is, the choice was around me and another person. And it was basically if I was to step up and take care of that person, or if I was going to kind of prioritize myself. Um, Another way to say that was what this person was asking of me fair,
Hmm.
right? And I think yeah,
Something from the conference or something from the past?
it was something at the conference. It was at the conference. It was someone I met at the conference, and I felt like the draw on my heart, specifically my heart, was more than I was willing to invest given the state of our relationship at that time.
Hmm.
There are certain relationships that because the thing about the heart is it doesn't have any boundaries. It doesn't have any walls. The true heart, the real open heart, that part of our being, I think, has compassion for everyone and sees and feels the suffering of everyone, especially if they're right in front of you and you can see it. And I can see that I can see it, and there's probably something I can do about it. And there's the other voice in me kind of coming more from the gut, or the more, you could say the practical level of my being, level three, what we usually call like practical intelligence. And it's saying,
Right.
is this the best use of our time and energy right now? And I think doing what this person would need from us is more energy than we're willing to expend, or we have to expend, given our other objectives here and given the other amazing things that are going on here. And that voice saying, I don't think we should lean further into this. I think we should set a boundary. And the heart saying, but we're cutting this person off. Isn't this what we should be doing? Should be leaning into this, should be allowing this, should be allowing the discomfort, should sacrifice everything. And it was that conflict between, do I set a boundary or do I allow this person in?
And how do you balance that trade-off in general where it comes to obviously you want like the openness of exploration and the openness of discovery, but you're still kind of pursuing a key objective at the same time.
Yeah, I think what's strange about it is that they have their own logics, like, and that are non-reducible in some sense. The question is just from like a higher order perspective, looking down at it, what is kind of like optimal to move through the whole system, if that makes sense. And
Mhm.
I think there were, I think there have been times in my life where where following that impulse has been really powerful and educational and generative and healing, not only for me, but for whoever it is that I'm with. Um, but I also know that I have a shadow there, or some sort of a issue there, where sometimes I'm so open and I'm so excited about making people feel like the center of attention, or making people feel really seen, that I can leave behind other things that need to get done and other things that I care about. And I think when I first started really interacting with people in the world, you remember this period, you were there for a lot of this period, when it's just me and you, it's like, we know we're going to be okay. We know we're going to regroup later in the night. We know we're going to have a good time. And we're trying to like have these adventures. And
Right.
so if I go spend 30 minutes talking to someone at a bar about whatever's going on for them, and not spending time with you, it's not like a big problem because we're so locked in, nothing's going to happen there. Um, but as I have grown older, like for example, I remember an experience at the Portola Music Festival last October when I was with a group, and I was kind of shepherding that group and trying to hold space for that group and kind of create a container for that group. And then there were other people that I normally would have talked to or normally would have like really brought in or given an amazing night, but I just had this kind of like responsibility or this commitment that I had made to this other group that I was holding space for, and I saw that it wasn't actually optimal for me to break that container and add this other person at that time. And so learning like, oh, I've actually made a commitment here. I think I felt this at Burning Man too, like knowing when to like go off and talk to other people, but also when the people need me and maybe there's something that I need to actually be there for, you know?
Hmm.
So
What gives you the calling that like you think you are needed in a scenario?
bro, these are great questions. These are great questions. What gives me the calling? I think I'm needed. I think the first thing I'll say is that I can see it. Like
Hmm.
I'm sensitive to it. Inherently, I'm sensitive to it.
Sensitive to what?
To the so maybe it's a combination between I7, the spiritual intelligence, or a combination or an emotional intelligence, or just expressive intelligence, being able to read people's faces and stuff. I tend to think it has, I don't know, it has to be some sort of a combination between, everything. But I think like when I'm interacting with someone, especially someone new, I'm getting a lot of information in, a lot of information in on how that person's doing, on things that they're excited about, maybe not excited about. And as we think pretty deeply about archetypes and about personality construction and about shadow and healing and growth and development. And when you think about that stuff for a long enough time, you can see patterns and there are common things that we all struggle with that are pretty easy to identify because most, a lot of the issues are within a certain bound. And so when you're kind of trained on looking at that stuff every day and looking at that stuff in yourself and trying to heal it, it's very easy to identify in other people. And then I think part of me is like, oh, I could be helpful for this person. I could like, I know what to say here. I could give them what they need.
What part of you like knows that you know what to say, if that makes sense? Like what part of you, like how do you know that to be correct or that to be true?
Yeah, I think this kind of goes to the reason why I use the word shaman, which is that the word shaman, at least the way that I understand it, is that it means someone who is someone who has been sick or has been wounded and has healed that themselves and overcame that sickness. And
Right.
by doing that healing has the antidote in the same way that like when you get a vaccine, you create the antibodies for the real thing. It's the same thing. It's like if I've been sick and if I've been hurt and if I've found a way to overcome that wound, then I now have that medicine that I can share with you. Um,
Not only that, you feel like you're pretty good at diagnosing what that is.
yeah. And you feel excited about being able to give that feeling of relief to someone else. Um,
What
but
was a time recently where you misdiagnosed someone or what you offered wasn't actually the right thing? Or you thought you were needed in a situation where looking back, you decided that wasn't actually true?
that's a really great question. Um, it happens quite frequently, honestly. It happens quite frequently. It happens quite frequently in the sense that in little ways, not in like huge ways, but in like, misreading, like the incidence goes down the higher my presence is. If I'm not super present and if I'm kind of just in my own head and then I see something, I can have this urge to be like, oh, let me talk about that or whatever. And I can't stop it. And it kind of comes out. And then after I'm like, oof, that wasn't exactly what was needed there. I think the higher my presence is, I'm like, oh, this person is stressed out. It maybe it isn't time just to talk about the concept of stress and calm and all this stuff, but to actually just like start breathing deeper, start holding more space for them, start putting myself into a more regulated space. And that's one of the lessons actually from the conference, which is healing is just scaffolding. And I can talk about that. But that's relates to that idea.
Right. Do you want to go into it?
Yeah.
What do
What I basically, so this guy, Andrew, I think his name was Andrew Holisek. I think that's how you pronounce it, but it may not be. He was talking about darkness retreat and the powers of darkness retreat. And, I know Aubrey Marcus has talked about it and different people that I follow have talked about it, but I've never really gone into it. And this was the first time like I really thought about it for like an hour. Um, and one of the things he said is that, the mind is like the body in the sense that when you break your leg, are the bells making too much of a noise?
I mean, they're wriggling a little bit, but
I think I'll pause on it for a second. Uh, I didn't know it had bells. I just thought it was a thing, but I think the bells make it great. Um, he was talking about how, yeah, when you break an arm, when you break a leg, something like that, what the doctor does is they set it and then they just leave it in a cast, and the body actually knows how to heal itself, right? And he said the mind is similar, and that if you put the mind in a cast, it knows how to heal itself. And he was making the claim that darkness was a cast, where kind of by taking away external distractions and you having to kind of face yourself, you are able to really easily see your shadows or easily see insecurities or things like this, and it kind of serves as a cast for the mind. And it made me think of this concept of archetypes that we talk about a lot, and this idea that um, you know one of the ways that I think sometimes healing is thought of as like, oh, you need to become this entirely different thing, or uh, what am I trying to say here? For example, David Goggins. David Goggins can be a cast for you in the sense of that you look at this guy and you say, okay, this guy is someone who has like ultimate kind of discipline, let's say. And you can ask yourself, what would David Goggins do in this moment? And that can kind of serve as a cast to move you in a certain direction. It serves as like a scaffold to move in a certain direction. And in the same way for healing, it's not thinking, oh, let me stop this behavior that I'm doing. That's kind of what I meant to say. Like, it's not about like, oh, this thing is bad, I need to stop this behavior. That's one way to look at it. But I think a better way to look at it is through the lens of a replacement behavior, which is, well, what would the healthy archetype do in this moment? Right. And try and just scaffold that and move towards that. And so there were other things that branched off this, like with regards to thinking about a new society, or thinking about a healthier culture, as opposed to, you know, berating the culture wars that are happening today and the problems that are happening in certain worldviews today that, people, accurately and sometimes maybe with more vitriol than they need to attack. Why don't we talk about what a healthy culture would look like? Why don't we talk about what the ideal response would be, as opposed to making fun of how bad a certain response was, right?
Mhm.
Why don't we, like, instead of being like, oh, these woke people are doing XYZ, or oh, these traditionalist people are doing XYZ things, or oh, it's like, well, in this scenario, if we have so much of a different altitude that we can criticize and analyze what's going on, what is the proper response in this scenario? And why don't we just embody that proper response? Um, so that
how do you find the proper response? What does that mean?
um, well, I think it's very situationally dependent, right? Um,
Right.
Depending on where the people are at, depending on what they're gonna, like you can use the system to understand something like this. Like, what intelligences is this person seeing the world through? What kind of need is primary for them right now?
Right.
Um, right? And depending on what that is, like if someone's primary need at this moment is like, a feeling of safety or calm, it doesn't matter to talk about a bunch of like heady intellectual concepts if what they need is actually just for you to slow down, lower your voice, appreciate where they're coming from, that sort of thing. So yeah,
Proper response in what context? As in like responding to anything or like responding to someone's like emotions or what do you mean?
um, well, I was specifically thinking of just in the example of like, you know, people on YouTube or cultural critics that say, like Ben Shapiro brings up a bunch of like, TikToks or something and just like shits on people, right? And says this person's so dumb, this person's so idiotic in this many ways, or oh look at people on Twitter say, oh, we're throwing stuff around, even
Right.
me throwing it at him. Whereas I think the ideal thing to do would be, well, from my perspective, what would help this person where they're at get what they need in a way that makes sense to them, not trying to impose a different view onto them, but meet them where they're at and see how you can help them there, I
So
guess.
you're saying like these people that are being critiqued, you should instead do what?
The people who are,
Because you're saying that like one group is being like overly critical over like they'll see some TikTok and they'll like make fun of them or something.
yeah, you're saying what's the better behavior there?
Yeah.
um Well, I think there's like a cause and effect chain of what gets you to a situation where you're doing that. So you can go all the way up the chain and say, well, maybe that's not a very productive exercise in general. And I would say that it's not a very productive exercise in general. But if you're in that scenario, I think what I try and do when I see something that like really kind of rubs me the wrong way is I try and be like, okay, I'm sure there are people that look at me and say the same thing. Like,
Right.
where is this person coming from? Why or how does what they're doing make sense to them? You know, that's an idea from design thinking. I think it's also an idea that's big in kind of the whole integral thing when done correctly, is this idea that, people make sense. People are saying true things. Um, people are people aren't crazy. They're not stupid. People are saying things and doing things and behaving in ways that are internally consistent to them, that make sense to them. So why?
How do you align that as like the primary form of voice that people are actually interested in? Like, for example,
Mhm.
the reason like all of these critics of I don't know what about like, whether it be woke culture, whether it be this or that, whatever. I
Right.
mean, the reason they get so many like clicks is because like to have a controversial take, to have like a hot take, to
Right.
have say something that goes against the norm, or even anything like that, like that's inherently far more interesting to people.
Yeah.
Like a moderate take is never very interesting.
Right. And the majority of people probably, or not the majority of people, the audience of that person agrees with that take, and they're excited about this person with a powerful expressive intelligence making that take for them, and then being able to.
I don't even know if I fully agree that like the majority of people that watch them like agree with the take
Okay.
like fully. I would argue that like
That's
I
true.
mean some of them like they're like they might have somewhat of a take, but they want to hear like the most extreme version of it to like get those data points.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like I mean even in like modern day politics today, like there's far more people that describe themselves as falling into the middle,
Hmm.
but everyone that has a voice is like either left or right
Right.
in like today's political landscape.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's an issue with the way that we do, the way that we do social media and the information ecology is it prioritizes those voices and it amplifies those voices. And a conversation, a real good conversation, who knows how many views that's going to get. At the same time, how much does it really matter, in the sense that the majority of people, I don't think, are in a space where they're like actively trying to grow and change and evolve their worldview.
Right.
um, and so, and when you look back at history, when you look at the people that led to the widespread adoption of level four, or of kind of postmodernism, or the people that led to the rise of modernism, that was a very small group of people who were thinking of stuff, figuring out stuff with each other, and then eventually it started to be proliferate into ways that everyday people started to see the value of, and they started to adopt those things. But
Do you think that could be done as easily today in with like social media how it is?
it's a good question. I think yes. I think now is a really special time, because if someone figures out something amazing in one place, it can be spread everywhere very quickly, and other people can start to pick that up very quickly. Of course, that's true for viruses. That's also true for antidotes. So it is kind of a tensor battle. Um, but I think the majority of human beings are looking for life to make sense, want to be happy, want to live a good life, want to feel like their life has meaning and they're enjoying themselves. And if there is a, philosophy or something to do or something to be a part of that meets that need in an effective and healthy way, I'd like to believe that it will spread organically.
Hmm. Do you think though that I think it's one thing for them to want those things, but it's
Yeah.
another thing for them to seek it out, or even for them to like for that to capture their attention, I guess, is a completely different thing.
Right.
And I think in kind of like the world where everything, I mean, algorithms are sort of chosen by kind of where people put their attention.
Right.
It doesn't always align with like what they want to put their attention on, but it's more so like you're kind of on autopilot, you're scrolling,
Right.
kind of just follows that path. Do you think that would allow people to find like whatever path you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I see it as kind of like, with my background being in like product design, I think I see it as kind of just like a product issue, you know, in the sense that um we're still in the early phases of this worldview. We're still in the early phases of, if you want to call it, in our system, we usually refer to it as level 5. In integral, they call it integral. In spiral dynamics, they call it teal. A lot of different people, they call it metamodernism. But this tier of consciousness that seems to be what's emerging here as a result or as a response to the meaning crisis, which is caused by the lack of any sort of shared meta narratives, which make it very difficult to coordinate to solve interconnected problems, i.e., all these interconnected crises we have today. It seems like people are trying to come up with a new sense of meaning now. Let me actually pause on that point for a second and go deeper into that for a second. So one of the things that we've been talking about for years now, and has got some more energy and juice behind it because of COVID, when something bad actually really happened, is this idea of the meta crisis or of some big interconnected issue that's happening. And there was a guy at the conference, his name was Bobby Azarian, half Persian guy, shout out. And he had a really nice breakdown, very kind of similar to the breakdown that I've used in the past of like protocols or kind of metaphysics ethics protocols, right? Like we're having problems with our systems because we're having problems with ethics because we're having problems with our maps of reality. He gave a great version of that kind of independently himself that I would love to share, which is we're experiencing a polycrisis right now. Polycrisis meaning many crises, interconnected things. Um, the climate disasters we're having, social media issues we're having, breakdowns in the sense-making capacity of society and the information ecology, political divisiveness, issues with education, rampant social, economic inequality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that these crises are interconnected. So they're not independent. They're actually reinforcing each other, and they have feedback loops with each other, and they're kind of systematically interwoven. The idea is that this is being caused by an upstream crisis called the meta crisis. So the poly crisis is being caused by the meta crisis, and the meta crisis is the inability to collectively coordinate to solve the poly crisis. So it's the inability to create systematic solutions that can actually solve these systematic problems. And the idea is that lack of ability to collectively coordinate to solve systematic solutions or systematic problems is coming downstream from a meaning crisis, which is the lack of any sort of shared meta understanding of what life is about, where we're trying to go as a species, what's real.
Mhm.
And that's another way of saying kind of protocols, ethics, metaphysics, which is the framework that we've used in the past.
Mhm.
And so that new map of meaning, which a lot of people are working on, I've taken a shot at it. A lot of people have taken a shot at it. People have been taking shots at it, even since after the Second World War, even, even Wilbur was taking shots at it in 1970, even 1990. A lot of people have been taking shots at it for a while now, which is something I was unaware of for a while. Um, And a lot of people are converging on kind of an evolutionary narrative, this idea that evolution has been going through bio or material stages. So from kind of the Big Bang to, atoms, and then in biological stages, going from kind of very simple cells to humans. And then the humans are now going through cultural stages and those are basically ways, same human, same biology, same being, figuring out new cultural ways to um, organize ourselves in more and more complex ways. And the idea is that there are patterns that hold true from, the smallest quark to a full information age society. And, one of these patterns is this concept of transcending and including, right? That the next level always includes the previous levels and then just adds something on top. This is true in biology, this is true in culture, etc. And so all of this is to say, I think we're still at a pretty early phase with regards to the development of this level 5 metaphysics or this level 5 meaning map. And it's going to take a second for the meaning map to be fleshed out into communities of practice, into songs, into art, into aesthetic objects that make it easier for people to interact with. Um, and I think that's when you'll see a big adoption, but that it takes a while for there to be enough people. Like it takes a while for there to be a full stack thing to do about this. Like right now, you can go to this conference. Right now, you can read a book. Right now, you can watch some podcasts on YouTube. But where's like the integral music festival? Where's the Woodstock for level 5? Right? Woodstock is like the festival for level 4. Where's that for level 5? I don't think it's until you see that when there's a big top of the funnel, like a big aesthetic doorway, right? Where people know what it means to act level 5, dress level 5, what movie characters are level 5, what, musicians are promoting level 5, etc. I think that's when you'll see a mass adoption. And there's no better time than now on the internet for that to happen.
Right. What do you think it would take for someone to understand that though? Because I feel like what you're saying like dress level 5, look level 5, like there's obviously layers of complexity to understanding what that even means. Like, do you think that what kind of level of an understanding are you kind of imagining in your head?
Well, I think the people who would be excited about this by definition are going to come from level 4 or postmodernism. So it's
Mhm.
people who are already kind of so I at the conference and in a lot of the literature they use certain words for the levels, and it might be useful to use those here instead of the levels because we haven't formally talked about the levels. So there's the levels that we usually consider part of level 3 are what they call traditional and modern. So the traditional worldview, so that of like traditional religion, or traditional societies that have kind of a code. In spiral dynamics they call it blue, and integral they call it amber. But this is the idea of like there's a way to do things. We do it this way. There are sinners, there are saints, and you want to be on the side of the saints, right?
Right.
And this was the worldview that ran, civilization for a very long time until about 500, 600 years ago, where you start to have the scientific revolution and the modern revolution and the enlightenment, which eventually leads to the industrial revolution and stuff. But the intellectual movement that precedes that is the enlightenment. And this is the modern or the rational stage, where it's not just about what was written down in a book, the idea that we can actually figure out things ourselves, that the world is knowable. It's not just, readable from a book or from some higher authority. I can do experiments, I can measure things, I can test things out, and I can discover truths that other people haven't discovered before. And this lends to a very strong belief in progress, a strong belief in kind of a directionality to history, as opposed to the traditional worldview where you see, like in Ecclesiastes in the Bible, he says, nothing new under the sun, right? Or the
Mhm.
idea in Hindu mythology and Buddhist mythology of there being kind of a cyclical nature to time, and time as repeating itself, and the universe being created and destroyed in these kind of repeated patterns, and the universe is being cyclic. When you have kind of modernity, you have this idea of no, actually, there was a time where we were dumb, and there was a time that we're smart, and we're going to be even smarter in the future. And technology is amazing, and the mind, this rational mind that can figure stuff out, that's kind of the pinnacle of achievement. And this was the worldview that kind of emerged at that time. It still wasn't the dominant worldview, but it started to change the world very rapidly. But now you would say that it is probably the dominant worldview in the West, at least. is this kind of modern or rational stage where people see the world as kind of, um, as some sort of a mechanism to be understand. The body, the personality, these sorts of things are seen as being able to be analyzed, taken apart, understood.
Right.
And it's just a matter of time until we figure everything out. The
Right.
postmodernists are a rejection of this, primarily from after the Second World War. So in the counterculture movement, and the during the Vietnam War era and all the stuff that was going on with the students and the artists at that time, that was kind of when it really came into cultural consciousness. But you could say that it was even budding from the beginning of the beginning of the century or after the First World War even, and you start to see it in art, like people really deconstructing these yeah, one of the things postmodernism is really well known for is deconstruction, right? It's taking a critical look at these meta narratives, a critical look at this view of what can be known and how things are, and it's saying, is that really true, or is that just based on your perspective and your cultural context? And actually, it seems like the reason you have that perspective is because you're coming at it from a very specific lens. But if we were to use other lenses, you would come to different conclusions. And so it starts to call into question um, postmodernism calls into question the idea that anything can be finally true and not just culturally constructed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very critical of, it can be critical of science as leaving things out. It can be critical of, it's critical of the industrialized society and the progress that modernism sees, because it looks at the from other perspectives is, hey, well, look at the perspectives of the planet, look at the perspectives of people of color, look at other perspectives that weren't included in this engine, and they're actually not doing as well because of this. And there are externalities that aren't being considered here with this kind of laser focus on progress. Um, and it starts to include indigenous perspectives, female perspectives, non-binary perspectives. All these perspectives now become part of the conversation, as opposed to, it's the ones who get shit done and make shit happen that rule the world.
Right.
And this belief that everyone's right, so no one can really hierarchize over each other. And so the idea is that people who really truly believe that, who have let back in maybe some form of a spiritual practice into their life because they see it as having some value, maybe people who are open to there being more to the universe than just atoms, or not that the universe isn't made out of atoms, but that there's also an interior dimension of being that can't be reduced to atoms. And that it's important to hold both these perspectives as true and real, and not just say, well, all your feelings, all your thoughts, all your emotions, those are just neurotransmitters in the brain. Being like, no, those are actually real, and they can actually only really be affected, or I mean, of course, they can be affected by the atomic layer because they're based on it, but they can't be reduced to it, if that makes sense.
Real in what sense?
Um, you mean
You said
real?
like you're like you can't reduce your emotions down to, I don't know, these neurochemicals and stuff like that. There's actually something real, but what do you mean by it's real?
Meaning it's a like in That's a good question. Um, I guess it's real in the sense that I'm actually having that experience, and that it's real to me, and that it seems to be real to other people. And it doesn't seem to be a way to see, like, yeah, I guess maybe this is a way to say it. The idea is that emergent phenomena are just as real as the phenomena that produce them. So that just because an ant doesn't necessarily know what the anthill is doing doesn't make the experience of the ant any less real. And the right, or it doesn't make the thing the anthill is doing more real than what the ant is doing, or the
Right.
collective organism more real than the ant.
So do you think real and true are different things then?
I think real and true are different things.
I mean,
Uh,
sorry, they're not the same thing, but like just because it's real, does that mean that it's true?
yeah, the idea, I mean, this goes all the way back to Descartes, and Descartes talking about the mind-body problem, and right, like there's the subjective experience and the objective experience. Wilbur knits these together, and he says that um, there are things that are subjectively true, and then there are things that are objectively true. Like, for example, if you ask me how I'm doing, like, for example, Kev, how do you feel in your body right now?
It's like All right, let's say for example, not too good.
Not too good. Like that's subjectively true, right?
Right,
Like that's an experience you're having.
right.
Um, and then there's like what your Apple Watch is saying about your heart rate and your sleep last night and all that sort of stuff. And that could be thought of as objectively true, but the idea is that we want to treat both of these things as real.
What do you mean by treat them as real though?
I think we
Like,
need,
because in the sense that I could interpret like the emotions I feel as in like I know I'm feeling this and I acknowledge I'm feeling it, but I know it to be false. Like under a false like piece or under false pretense, I guess, in the sense that like there can be things that trigger because I'm human, because I have like a monkey brain that like are making me feel like I'm in danger,
right?
even though I know these things aren't true.
Well, would you say you're having the experience of feeling endangered?
Right. But I
That
know that, that's like part of my subconscious brain being triggered from sort of stimulus from some sort of thing that isn't actually like putting me in actual danger or
but
like
that
when you look at something on your phone and you see like I don't know a girl or a something really cool going on or something like that. Like parts of your brain, like completely subconscious, are firing that are telling you something about that.
right,
Just like it's like real in front of you. But
right,
your conscious brain, like when you really think about it, you're like the subconscious brain that was triggered, like that. What I'm looking at is not even true. Like my brain is being fooled, but I'm aware my brain is being fooled.
right. And I think but all those things are still real. Like that experience that you're having is still a real experience. Just
Hmm.
because it might not be objectively true that she looks like that doesn't mean that you're not still having a subjective experience that is real of appreciating the way that she looks.
And you're saying that subjective experience is valid in what way?
It's valid full stop.
Okay.
It's valid in the same way that my heartbeat right now is valid,
Mhm.
right? This
But
is like,
but so let's say we're saying the subjective experience is valid, the objective experience is valid. Let's say they differ. Which one do I listen to?
well, the thing is in a lot of cases, they're measuring completely different things. So let's think of an example there. Because like there's no objective way to see like, yeah, actually, yeah, let's think of an example here.
Okay. So you're watching a scary movie.
Okay.
Uh, I guess like subjectively, there are parts of your brain that trigger your heart rate starts racing. Subjectively, you're like have this feeling of like, am I gonna die?
Right.
Like there's like stress that goes on your brain.
Right.
So that's like what the subjective experience? The subjective experience would be that you have
Feeling.
get this feeling. The objective thing would be like your heart's racing.
Right.
So I guess that's an area where they're aligned.
Right.
Um, are you asking like when are like a case where they're misaligned?
Or I guess you were saying in what was the original question?
Like, okay, so I mean, I get when I'm saying they're aligned, like sorry, that might not have been the best example. But what I was saying was that like sometimes you have a subjective experience that's telling you one thing, but like the logical like side of your brain when you like think about it in terms of truth or in terms of a truth of like I don't know, like people get really stressed on planes, but then when you look at the actual evidence of like what's the percentage of people that actually die on planes versus driving a car,
Right.
like you know that it's misaligned logically.
Yeah. The the thing is that all of that is happening still internally. Like that's actually still a subjective experience, right? In the sense that if I'm like having a subjective experience of feeling scared, and then someone brings me data that says, well, you shouldn't be scared in this moment, a lot of people, it doesn't just instantly turn off their feeling of being
No, it
scared.
doesn't. Yeah.
And so I guess in that way, it's valid, right? Because what's like kind of snuck
What's
in,
valid?
what?
What do you mean by it's valid?
It's worth treating on its own terms,
Hmm.
right? Because like we're
I
talking,
agree with what you're saying is like it's not an effective strategy for a lot of people to like throw evidence at them of being like there are like issues and conflicts that come out that are purely from like an emotional lens,
right,
and battling that with logic like never works.
never works, right? There's problems that you're having in a physical level, battling that emotionally isn't gonna work,
Right.
right? I mean, they're somewhat interrelated to some degree, but the idea is that the idea is that in the modernist view or in the solely objective worldview, what's hidden in that is basically I6, I3, so abstract or cognitive intelligence and practical intelligence, like supremacy.
Right.
The
And
belief that
and
those things are
you're
real.
saying that those like I mean it's more a statement about the other elements being repressed in the culture.
Yeah, that's the idea. Is not that it's suddenly not that it's not true. And that's one of the problems that you can have in like um, insane, like crazy postmodernist like tears is they just go, well, it's fake entirely. It's like, well, it's not fake, it's just not the entire picture. And to be full holistic humans, ideally we are using all the tools that we have at our disposal and all the perspectives we have at our disposal, as opposed to just over prioritizing a few.
Mhm. What do you think? How do you think the culture changes if we, so you're saying that like obviously I6 is over indexed on I3.
What do you think about that?
Are you asking if I agree with that?
Yeah.
Um, no, yeah, I agree. I mean it's just it's the scales that are aligned with like what makes, I mean, I guess typically what just produces more in like a capitalist society.
Yeah. Yeah, I think another way to say it is for the modernist worldview, they are the effective tools to achieve the aims of the modernist view.
Right. The aims being to like rise the ladder.
Yeah, the aims being economic productivity, technological progress, the development of uh, rational or objective knowledge,
Hmm. Hmm. I
science.
mean, but I feel like it's just like a different for the majority of the world, it's kind of just a different ladder that got established. Like the ladder just became a lot taller, I guess.
The latter being
Like
the
people were always chasing status within their community, whether it be tribal community, whether it be,
right.
I don't know,
Yeah,
medieval community, whatever. But there were just different skills that were dominant during those different periods of time to like achieving top rung of the ladder. Like
right.
for example, like in like a tribal society, it's like if you're way more I1 or like way more like
Kinesthetic.
body awareness, yeah, is
Yeah,
like so important.
totally. Yeah, that's
Like well, like what I don't, I'm trying to think like what point in history was like in aesthetic intelligence or things like that valued like as a symbol of status,
um
as a mechanism to get you status. It's probably more.
anytime I think we've had a very complex or okay, here's what I'll say. One of the areas in which our system differs or adds an extra dimension from integral proper and some of the other meta theory propers is that we talk about needs or drives in addition to worldviews. So what I mean by that is in our system, the idea is that you have all seven needs at every moment. So I always am going to have the need for survival at every moment. I'm always going to have the need for some sort of comfort at every moment. I'm always going to have the need for some form of status, respect, esteem, belonging at every moment. I'm always going to have the need for love and some sort of intimacy or closeness, the fourth need, the heart need. I'm always going to have some sort of need to express myself and express how I'm doing and what I feel is right in this scenario. I'm always going to have some need to understand things, for things to make sense and cohere in a logical way. And I'm always going to have some sort of need for things to have some ultimate meaning or to have some reason or purpose. The idea is that those seven needs emerged in us throughout evolution and are present with us every moment right now. And at different points in our life, in different scenarios, and also over different spans of time, those different needs are prioritized or not prioritized.
Mhm.
And the idea is that we move in kind of a sequential form, or our meaning making system over time learns how to start integrating these needs into complete worldviews. And that's where the worldviews come in, is they're kind of centered at a certain tier of needs, and they're a way to manage the previous needs and that need kind of being dominant. And slowly that's moving up. So it's this like this weaver that's trying to make sense of these seven needs, but it's kind of weighted differently as the weaver goes up and is knitting together this meaning making system. So that's how I think about the drives or the needs, kind of Maslow's sort of situation, evolutionary drives, in addition to what Wilber talks about or what Lovinger talks about or what spiral dynamics talks about in terms of worldviews or meaning making systems.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the idea is that so always in every society, people have been interested in aesthetics, and there have been certain cultures that have been specifically excited about it. Um, and I would say most cultures were more excited about it than the modernists. The modernists are a lot less excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would probably say that's true. I mean there are different ways it's expressed, right? It's not really apples to apples in terms of like I mean the way that like I guess the pre-modernists got were able to kind of like express like aesthetics things were like through architecture or through paintings or through those forms. And I guess like in today's world, there's like just so many other ways that does get expressed
Yeah,
that didn't really exist before.
yeah,
I mean, I guess music is made at like a rate that was not even close to being possible
right.
before.
I think
Like,
postmodernists like aesthetics for sure, but I
right.
think strict modernists let's look at like any sort of like industrialized downtown area. Like it's rare if you see
Oh,
a
like,
skyscraper that's like taking a risk aesthetically.
right.
Usually when they do, it's like they like change the shape of the window or something. It doesn't even come close to like what people were doing for churches and stuff.
Mhm.
Even 500 years ago, six,
You
like,
think that's because of how the culture values it or what?
yeah, I think it's because for example, if I showed up to a business meeting at McKinsey, or if I showed up to a business meeting at whatever, pick your favorite, JP Morgan, and I was wearing, like, if I looked like this, they would probably take me a little less seriously than if I showed up with a crew cut and a suit, because the idea in that worldview is that what humanity is doing and what's going on in the universe is we're getting smarter, we're understanding things better, we're becoming less primal and less bodily, and we're becoming more heady, and we're figuring out how to figure out this messy thing we call life and like put it in its place, kind of.
Right.
And so if I look like I'm letting this messy thing called life do its own thing, it's like subconsciously like, well, he's not really on board with the program here, which is kind of making everything efficient and running well, and how to, making sure everything sits in its right place and fits into a cohesive diagram and that sort of
Right.
thing.
Right. Yeah, I think there's an element too of like the fact that I don't know. I think that the certain elements of like community that people stood by made it a point of pride to like kind of be a little different or make it like the ultimate building or the ultimate form. Like the thing you mentioned about like obviously architecture was like a big way it was expressed was like through churches.
Yeah,
And like they had this religious community they belonged to, and that was something they wanted to like express.
right.
But
Yeah,
I guess like kind of postmodernism, like the fact that everyone's like all this like globalizations happen, like people are kind of trying to ascribe or trying to like follow one set of rules.
right. They're not with that, is what you're saying.
Um, I think they're just like less with taking risks. They want there's like more of a feeling of like conformity to the most prevalent cultural.
You're saying postmodernists are more conformist to the prevailing culture?
Yeah. Do you disagree?
At least the way that I'm thinking of postmodernists is level four, right? And in which
Mhm.
case they are rejecting, I guess the way that I think of level four is, or postmodernism is you are rejecting by definition any sort of meta narrative, especially previous ones, colonial ones, monetary based ones, capitalist ones, etc. And you're trying to basically allow for as many perspectives as possible to exist, coexist, and not
You
infringe
think
on.
that feels like that's fully the case though? Like,
Well,
because if what I'm saying is like, what if you look at buildings in New York versus buildings in Shanghai versus buildings in Tokyo versus buildings in Dubai, they like all kind of look the same.
well, those are all from level three. Those are all from Orange or modernism.
Right.
Those are made by modernist homies by in modernist means. I'm talking about like the barista who works at the coffee shop at the
Yeah.
bar.
Okay. Maybe I was using the term. I think I misused the term postmodernism when I meant modernism.
Right. Yes, modernism,
I think that's the problem. That
modernism and globalization. You can flick on the TV channel in Shanghai and the TV channel in New York City, and the newscaster is going to have the same haircut and is wearing the same style of clothing
right.
because modernism is all about that. It's all about what's the hottest, what's the newest, coolest thing that we did. Let's be on that wave, right? Like MKBHD, right? It's just hunting. It's like, what's the coolest shit that we just did? Like, what did we just figure out that I gotta know? It's like, who knows if it even like improves your life in any respect, but it's like, I got it, you know? It's
Right.
that mentality.
Right. It's like features. You want new features.
Yeah, you want new features, you want the newest screen, you want the newest this, because
And
that's what?
then better life.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Whereas, in the traditional worldview, they could give a fuck because they're saying, well, what's the meaning of that? How does that get me closer to being a good person? How does that, right? Like country singers are like, I don't want to lump everyone in, but I would say the genre of country is primarily coming from this, what they call the traditional worldview, or what we sometimes call 3.0, or what you could call, um, amber in integral or blue in spiral dynamics. It's this idea that there is kind of a way to do things. It's never going to change. Let's do it that way. And
Right.
right, and there's like a right, like Cole sent me that song Automatic. I think it's by Miranda Lambert or something like that. And it's about how like the car sucks now that it's automatic and like doing things manually, whether that be in relationships, in life in general, is like kind of the key to happiness.
Right. Right.
That kind of speaks to that, right? That's kind of a anti-modernity statement,
Right.
right? Of like, I don't need this automatic shit that like switches itself. I'd rather like do it myself, have
Like
me.
yeah. Meaning in the sake of doing the thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Whereas,
yeah, because there's like meaning assigned to the process of like having done it.
yes,
In the same way, like you could have a blender, but like if I told you this was like a hand blended milkshake, you'd be more hyped.
for sure. And but modernism looks at that and is like, why would I have one guy mix a fucking milkshake when I can have
Right.
one machine mix 12 milkshakes at the same time.
Just
And
kind of optimize production and optimize
right,
like when they're I was just listening to this case about it was about chilies, and they were basically saying they're like, yeah, we're really just trying to like modernize our approach, and like if we save like 45 minutes at this store here, think about the savings that would add up over the course of all of our stores in a year.
right,
And it was like 20 examples. It was like 100 examples of or that.
right,
And it's like obviously that saves a lot of money, but then you also go back to the question of like, wait, should we like change our approach completely? And like what do people find meaning in this like experience of Chili's?
right,
So like
right.
I mean there's obviously like merit to both to some degree, but
Yeah. And I think what I've come to understand, and I think what we're understanding is that all of these layers never go away. It's not like they're not, it's not like it's a view that like was good for a time and then like fuck it, we're somewhere else and we can just throw it away. The reason I've stuck by the name Ancestor, even when a lot of well-intentioned people have told me that it's a bad name because it focuses on the past, is like that's kind of the whole point. I'm trying to reiterate into consciousness that these previous levels exist in us, even especially if you're integral, especially if you're meta hyper rational post, like especially the more aware you are, the more aware you are of the fact that these parts of your life, there are certain parts of your life that require a situationally appropriate version of that mindset. And you see this, I saw this I see this in my own life when I look back. It's like whenever I went through a stage transition from one worldview to the next, because I'm kind of an extreme person and kind of intense, I tend to throw out the values of the previous one and struggle with reintegration. And that's a part of development always, is throwing out the thing or differentiating from the thing so that you can identify with something new. But you have to go back and clean it up. And I've seen a lot of issues recently, actually, just even in the past few months, of things that are very level four and so beautiful at level four, but they've completely at the postmodern egalitarian pluralist stage, and they've thrown out any semblance of, tradition, protocol, efficiency, esteem, and all the level three needs like have been totally thrown out. And so it's actually kind of hard to stay in a true level four because the thing that should support it is not actually there. The right, because you actually need this overabundance that is created by efficient operation, you know, um, scalability, et cetera. It's that abundance that allows us to relax into a more egalitarian state, and then it's from there that we can do integral stuff. But you can't just get into an egalitarian state if everyone has to work so much every day and we're getting stuck in these lower places, right? You actually
right,
have, efficiency is prerequisite.
right. I mean, you definitely think that like the world of automation, kind of what's coming ahead in the next like 10, who knows, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, will really impact how people view what is meaningful, how people view like I think really accelerate people into kind of a level four mindset.
Totally.
Because when you find out that like the work you're doing doesn't really have like meaning in from a productive lens,
Right.
like because humans are gonna lose their role in a lot of situations as being productive.
Yeah, I think if it's done correctly, um, the material aspect of the three levels, or of at least the modernity thing, is going to be taken care of by actual machines as opposed to making humans machines, you know
Right,
and then ideally humans can actually do the human stuff, and still humans are always going to have to access their their modern impulse, or that level is always going to be alive in people, that industrious nature, that entrepreneurial nature, you know
right,
um is always going to be alive in human beings, but ideally we're not forced to be stuck there more than we'd like to be.
right. Yeah, I guess and the upside, that's how where humans go. And the downside, it's sort of like Wall-E or sort of like Black Mirror, 10 Million Merits, like
Totally.
where you become sort of a slave to the thing that you created because
Right.
it's just poking on low level needs and just beating you.
Yeah. But I think I'm optimistic in the sense that I think when I look at my life on the micro scale, it's the difficult scenarios, it's the hard truths that have prompted me into development. And I think when you look at the global scale, um, that's what you see as well, as scary as that is to say on a global scale, because there's so many individuals that are affected by it. I think the fact that social media is like TikTok being as effective as it is has woken up so many people to the dangers of your phone, dangers of social media, when that wasn't even a topic of conversation, in 2010, 2012, 2014. No one was saying the stuff that they're saying now. But it's
Do you think that's a consequence of it having gotten a lot worse until it's like you like it's like the camel's back as the break?
yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Straw
Like
that broke the camel's back is like it finally like went on long enough.
yeah. I think it got to the point where it's like everything in our world right now is so exaggerated that it's kind of like obvious that it's getting out of hand, you know?
Right.
Whereas they
But why is that a good thing?
well, because a lot of people that normally would let it slide or think of it as harmless are waking up to the fact that maybe they want to have a different relationship with it,
Right.
right? Whereas like in the 90s, like yes, everyone on the magazine covers are photoshopped, but and you could tell someone, hey, the magazine covers aren't real, but like people, it's still really affecting them subconsciously. Whereas
Right.
now, many more people are aware of the fact this photo, most photos you see on social media are super edited, and I think,
But
oh,
yeah, I think it still requires that like that might be the intermediate step, but you still need one more bigger step of the culture to actually have like a pushback on it.
right, and that
Like
and it,
same thing with like smoking. It's like obviously there's some point where like smoking may or it's probably not good for you, but we don't really know. And then they decide smoking is actually really bad for you.
right,
And then there's still a lot of countries where everyone smokes.
right.
But in the US, we hit sort of an inflection point at some point where it like became like, at least in California, where it's like smoking, like people kind of look at you funny if you're smoking cigarettes.
Right.
And
Right.
like, I don't know, I'm sure that will happen too with other elements of health, of like
Yeah,
fast food, even, or
totally. I mean, I think now, I mean, so I think
sugar.
culture isn't,
Yeah, there's pushback on that.
totally. I mean, like when you go, when I get any food, or you go to any restaurant, most napkins at a bunch of restaurants are gonna say this was made with post-consumer recycled paper, or most packaging items you encounter are gonna say please recycle or like help save the planet, please recycle. You know, it is in the consciousness. But it's not necessarily dominant, or it's not hasn't changed everyone's behavior, but a lot of these things are becoming a lot more prevalent.
Is that a healthy way to solve these dynamics though? Like, for example, when I was even the dynamic of smoking,
Right.
the reason why it's no longer like in the culture is because like there's a feeling of shame for smoking.
Yeah,
And
unless
like likewise for even eating like fast food or a lot of sugars, sometimes in like at least in the Bay Area, there's like this shame around it to some extent.
right, if the culture actually has a strong level three. But if that's been eroded and it's postmodern land, then anything goes, and you can be a bajillion pounds, and that's seen as it should be just as okay as anything else, right?
Hmm.
And the reaction to that is people like Goggins or other people who, instead of creating an integral perspective of saying, well, we accept people for where they're at, and we believe that, a healthy body means a healthy heart and a healthy mind and is probably better for everyone. They just go and say, screw fat people, screw anyone who's not doing this exact protocol that I'm doing. And
Right.
like, David Goggins, like, and people who follow him, it's like, you know, anything less than what he's doing at the maximum is seen as like soft or as seen as like, like he's the saint and everyone else is a sinner. And it's just like a gradient of like, how close to him are you? And he's even chasing this archetype that he isn't. He's chasing this archetype that's like even more hardo than he is, right?
You
And
mean like the other version of himself?
yeah, he's chasing like this archetype of who David Goggins is. And like
Right.
I'm sure he has off days. I'm sure he has days where he doesn't want to do it, but it's that voice in his head of saying, "Well, I have to be that guy. I'm that guy." And he's going that way, which is also what went down for the majority of human history was we had gods or deities that we saw as prime as divine, and all human activity was to be molded in the shape of those divine
Right.
archetypes.
To what extent do you think that's healthy versus not healthy?
I think it's absolutely unavoidable, is what I think. I think it's happening always, whether we acknowledge it or not. And so the best thing to do is to create the healthiest archetypes and the most varied archetypes that we can and have that plurality of archetypes as being valid and okay and seen as um, real and move in that direction. And that's what Integral has attempted to do. That's what I've attempted to do. We've attempted to do with the system. The system, we consider one part of the system an archetype system, but the whole system is technically an archetype system in the sense of that like a level is an archetype, right? A level, someone with a certain worldview is a type of person, right? Someone with a dominant intellectual intelligence or someone with a dominant emotional intelligence is a type of person. We don't call those archetypes, we call those intelligences and levels or intelligences or worldviews. But those are technically archetypes. And so by creating a map of reality that has, 7 levels of ego development or, 7 levels of arranging your needs, 7 intelligences, various, 12 archetypes, various states of consciousness available to us. We're saying all of this is real and is true. And the goal is to always be pushing for kind of a personalized archetype of you that is a little bit better in your dominant intelligences, a little bit better in your worse intelligences, a little bit higher awareness than you were yesterday, a little bit more compassionate and able to take more perspectives than you were yesterday. And what am I missing there? I guess, and yeah, more developed in your dominant archetypes as well. And that's the deity for us. The deity for us is the apex you. And when you put all of those together, or is the apex you that can happen today. It's not the apex you that could happen in 100 days or whatever, because that doesn't exist. The future literally doesn't exist. There's just
Right.
now arising. So the archetype is just a little in front of you, right?
Right. Totally.
But
Um, yeah, I think switching gears a little bit, I think I wanted to address like you mentioned something about the idea of fields.
yes, I want to talk about these fields. I don't want to stand up for the field because I want to change the field. And let's hope I don't rip out my outlet down here. Just gonna view it. Okay.
Rise up,
What?
rise up.
Heads up, dude. Oh, it's happening. Oh man. Yeah, I pulled my outlet out of the wall. I don't know what I just pulled out. Hopefully it wasn't something important. I think it was a TV, but you don't need it. Um, I'm also going to use the restroom very quickly. Maybe we can edit this portion out. If you don't want to edit it out, say something the people need to hear.
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right. Little check-in. How do you think? How you feeling? How's it going? How do you think we're doing?
Uh, Pretty good. What do you think?
I think pretty good. I actually think it's been great. I liked that discussion about what's real and going into that. I thought that was cool to see us like because that was like actual sense making. That wasn't me just like saying something that I already believe. That was like us actually coming to a synthesis live, which I
Right,
think
right.
where the magic is, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I would say there's like one thing of like knowing you're being recorded where you're like, ah, fuck, like how out of pocket can I be?
I feel that too. It's weird because like we normally don't ever think about that. And so much of it is like we're talking in slang and shit, whereas now we're like,
Yeah,
you know,
a little less slang.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's been a lot less homies.
A lot less time I know. Yeah.
Um,
Um I
Young but
young what?
just like the young anything.
We might have to bring the young back. Um yeah, it's actually something I wrote, something I experienced at Rolling Loud 2020. And this is actually it'll tie into the fields. Um but something I experienced at Rolling Loud 2023, which is we were going crazy. We had a mosh pit. It was like the littest one. It was the one that was going the craziest. And then because of that, it attracted someone with a camera. And the second the camera came on this group of people that were going crazy, like everyone started kind of pandering to the camera, you know? And it killed the thing that made it camera worthy.
Right,
And I think that that is like a fundamental barrier in this sort of content.
right, right. It's like you almost need to not know things are being recorded.
Right. Yeah, like putting something like taking a picture of an animal kind of like kills what's cool about the animal. Or like what's taking a picture of an alive thing like kind of kills it. You're like crucifying.
Which is an area that's like a little disappointing at times though, because like it's always hard to strike the balance of like I want to have these memories to reflect back on, but I also don't want to kill the moment which is being made from the fact that it's just happening,
Right.
or like the fact that I don't have a record of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's a tough dynamic.
Yeah, I think it's like it's a fundamental polarity that like can't be like it can be integrated, but it can't necessarily be like reconciled ever,
Hmm.
you know?
Right.
And part of me thinks, part of me in this experience specifically thinks that it's actually some of it, part of it is just like a skill thing of like us actually just being like comfortable with it and like not feeling, not judging ourselves. Like I think it's an internal thing that we can actually figure out too.
Right, right, totally. Because I definitely think over time you become closer to your kind of true self.
Right. I think
Because
so.
you realize like the filters, like and stuff like that.
My
Like
guess is a
it
big,
becomes subconscious to some
yeah,
extent.
yeah. Right now we're probably like unconscious or consciously incompetent. I think we're consciously incompetent of our ability to do this.
Yeah, yeah. But that's where you gotta be.
You know what I mean? Um,
We did the other phase without doing this phase.
the cycle. I
Yeah.
think too that it's like my guess is after the first like really bad hate comment or first like bad experience that you have, my guess is it changes drastically because my guess is there's some sort of like subconscious fear of like what if I sound dumb or what if I, we're not it's not a cool conversation or whatever it is. And I feel like once you actually see that, like someone actually says that, then you can be like, oh, like
Hmm.
onwards.
Hmm. For sure.
Okay, twin fields.
Yeah.
Okay. I unplugged my TV, which is great because now I have to focus on the actual field and not just so the I would say the biggest insight I got from this conference was that anything worth calling future civ, anything worth calling a new society or something like that is going to evolve in the intersubjective space.
Say that again.
Anything anything worth being called future civ or a new tier of society or whatever it is going to emerge first in the intersubjective space, in the space between us. And that space is obviously supported by my body and my mind, who are bringing things into this space. But Future Civ isn't Ari Nazem at level 5. Future Civ isn't you at level 5, right? Future Civ is a bunch of people who are thinking from this kind of integral worldview, coming together and creating an creating a field together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the crystallization of that field into systems that is what we call Future Civ. But the living thing happens in the intersubjective space. So I think before I had this misconception that I can sit in my room, I can come up with the map of human nature, then I can share that map of human nature with other people, and then we're just going to live in that map, and we're going to be in level 5 Future Civ. Amazing, right? Like, but what actually is going to happen is I'm I've worked on myself to the point where maybe I can access that tier a good amount, and I can come together with other people who can also access that tier, and we try and create a environment at which all of us can kind of get in that tier safely and comfortably. And then we play together, and whatever we like, the way we play together eventually will become crystallized into systems that then are a new form of society. But you can't start with the systems first and say, I'm going to create this sort of behavior by creating this system first. It's like you try and actually create the behavior, the feeling that you're trying to create first, and then systematize it after, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, instead of saying like, yo, I'm gonna make this crazy death metal song and it's gonna sound XYZ da 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 da. It's
You make
like
it
you just start making the song. And then it's
right.
like, hey, it's not death metal enough. How do I make it more death metal? It's like, well, we have to speed up the time signature. Okay. Well, I need to wear corpse paint. Okay. It's like, and then you start going more, but you're tracking the real thing, which is the death metal song, as opposed to you're making the idea of a death metal song better and better and better.
Right.
And I think
What would that mean? You're making the idea of a death metal song better.
I think this is one of the fundamental, like, whether you want to call it like dark attractors or hurdles or difficulties when it comes to this sort of thing, which is that, like, I think I've fallen into this trap. I think a lot of others have fallen into this trap too, which is I can sit in my room and I can continuously imagine in my head what like the perfect utopia looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I can keep going, like, and then we're gonna have the cars do this, and then we're gonna have the people greet each other like this, which is gonna be so like beautiful and peaceful. And then we're gonna, and you just like you're building this diorama in your mind. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? But
That
like
never comes out that way.
it never comes out that way. Maybe the first
Yeah,
thing you do,
it's like visualizing a painting that you're gonna paint. It's like you could visualize every single detail, but like it just changes when you do it.
you do it.
Yeah.
Maybe you have the skill to execute on that vision. Maybe when the colors actually land on the page together, they look different than you thought. Maybe you're out of time. Maybe, it's like
Right.
there's so many things. And so the best way is actually just to, with unskilled hands, with an open heart and an open mind and a healthy body, show up to the playroom with a bunch of other people and say, all right, guys, let's figure this out. We need to eat. We need to, what do we need to do? And then someone's like, well, I'm hungry. All right, how do we figure that out? You know,
Yeah, totally.
and you just keep again and a day after day after day after day.
That's
It's like,
building anything,
yeah, yeah. But it's we need that orange layer. We need that 3.0 layer, or 3.5 layer. We need that modernist layer, that entrepreneurial spirit, and we need the sensitivity to people's emotions and different perspectives, and we need the ability to integrate those, right? So this can't be done just from a 3.5 perspective. And there are some people today that are trying to do this from a 3.5 perspective, like trying to build a city, you know, um, top
Mhm.
down. And it's like it just can't be top down. It has to be an emergent process.
Right.
Right.
Right. Like to have the culture, you can't just build the thing. You can't just build the city and expect the culture to show up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. You
which is
build,
definitely something that you notice in cities that did adopt that mentality versus like they don't have the history or the culture that like I don't know, a place like Hanoi or like place that like maybe the buildings aren't as clean or like the streets aren't as clean, the buildings aren't as nice. Like that you just can't like buy culture.
you can't, right? Because it's a field. It's an actual thing. It's a living thing that people are breathing life into, you know? Um, it's I think festivals are so interesting because they're an example of like some form of a society or some form of a social structure being like created and then disappearing.
Hmm.
And it does, I think a lot of festivals do allow people to achieve or they scaffold people to achieve a higher level than they can in day-to-day life,
Hmm.
which is interesting. I'm just throwing this out there. I don't have a specific thought on it.
Like you mean like in the ways that like music festivals like the elements of them bringing people together or what?
Yeah, like you see at like a music festival, the way people interact with you is very different than they interact with you like on the subway or in the street or even just like at a bar.
Right.
Like the fact that you have this container that you kind of have to like scan into and it's like kind of hard to leave and you've probably put on like a cool outfit and you've like cleared your schedule, you know? It's like all these things are kind of helping you be really present and
And
show
I
up.
feel like all you need is like one or two pieces of like evidence or context, and that it opens this like sense of shared experience or shared reality.
Yeah, wait, say more on that.
I mean, that kind of applies to anything, right? It's like it's either you have a lot of like shared experience or like you have it's like you could have experienced a lot of things together, or another way you bond with other people is like you're kind of you're about something this like the same way, like you belong to the same thing,
Resonating in
whether
some
it's like a college, whether it's a job, whether it's the city you lived in.
right. You're in the same container to some degree. You're
Yeah.
in the same water, in the same field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in the same field, but the field has to be not everyone.
Yeah. That's kind of the strange thing about it. And you could say, well, there are fields that do include everyone, like the field, the universal fields, the planetary field, you know. Um, but until that whole thing is intentionally engaged with and clear and open, it's probably not worth using that one just yet. Um,
It's like the fields where it's less common to see people, the more meaning is ascribed to it a lot of the
yes.
time.
Yes, I think so.
I mean, given the fact that it was also kind of significant, as in like there was some amount of attention that was devoted to it.
Right. Right. So this is kind of
Like for example, like I mean, Jasper gives example like when he meets like someone that's another guy that's Dutch,
yeah.
like they become because they have all this shared reality of like culture and history, and it
Yeah.
doesn't happen very often.
Right. Like, because if I say, like, yeah, if I'm like this person's Persian and I'm Persian, it's like there's all this stuff that just entered the field between us that we can start to play with that like we haven't even had to said, but now is like on the table.
Right.
You know, like I know,
But I think if it gets too big, like let's say you're in a community where everyone's Persian, then it doesn't really it's not like a meaningful interaction the same way.
right. That's the rare attribute theory. Like you always identify with your rarest attribute in a space.
Right.
Like the Persian thing hits when like everyone else is white, and then it's like, oh shit, like you're Persian, like me too, you know. But like if
Right.
everyone's Persian, then it's like, oh, you also like dropped out of school, like, or like, oh, you also are like on some other
Or
shit.
you're finding like a more specific subculture.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Like oh like you go like for example the music festival obviously like, there's like like people are nice and whatever, but like I think the reason it hits harder is because you're both like, oh, I'm gonna go see this person. So it's not only do you exist in the
right,
music festival, but you're like a fan of this person at the music festival.
right.
I
Right.
don't think you're like talking to every single person you walk by, like the water stand or the bathroom line.
No.
But
Unless
like you guys are, I mean, it might happen. It probably happens more often than normal day-to-day life, but
right,
like it's definitely hits harder when you're like at the same.
totally. Totally. And this is the thing that I kind of have been thinking about, like that there are things that like structure fields, like sound structures a field. So like if two people are hearing the same thing, you're kind of instantly in the same field because you're being synced up to the same thing. I saw this just a few days ago when I did this. I went back to my fraternity and I don't know if I've told you vocally what happened, or did I?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. But I was playing the drum, and before I started playing the drum, people were like interested, kind of engaged. But when I started playing the drum, everyone was like resonating together and they were super present and
Right.
created this field that we were all in because we were all hearing the same sound. And I was literally creating the sound, which was structuring the resonance. And I think outfits do the same thing. Like, remember at the mall, like when I was super like gothed out and I saw that like other goth girl and we like kind of looked at each other, we're like, yo, like you get
Yeah,
it. Because like you both did this thing. You know what I mean?
right.
Um,
But it has to be there has to be some sense of rarity to it in that case as well.
right. Yeah,
Because
what was
it's
the equation? It's like investment, I think, is part of the equation.
yeah, investment.
Hold on. Oh, it's not doing it. There was one where it becomes like a storm. Investment,
It-
rarity,
what to like creating shared.
like in like how like for example, if someone is wearing like full face of white makeup, full black eyeliner, full black lipstick, fake lashes, crazy piercings, crazy tattoos, fishnets, goth boots, everything. If they're going full goth and then I show up and I have like a black t-shirt on and I'm like, yo, like goth sister, she's gonna be like,
Yeah.
what? But if I show up with like corpse paint on and like some crazy like black leather armor and 3-inch boots, we're gonna look at each other without even needing to say anything. So it's like the more you invest,
I mean, it's also just indicative of how deep you are into the culture itself.
right,
Like anyone could like put on a black shirt, you know.
right, right,
You
right.
have to like care, you have to like care about it to be that deep and
Yeah, like but it is a form of investment. Like you're saying, like I'm kind of like I'm willing to show up to this thing,
right.
like, look a certain way. Yeah, because it's like by the further the less I look like other people, the more I look like you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't feel like necessarily like so what is the equation if you thought of if you're saying what's the equation, what do you think the equation's for?
Maximum resonance
Within two individuals or within a group? Because they could be different. I'm not sure.
between people generally,
Two people.
between any n people.
Hmm.
One of the things that like let me just throw out a couple things that I noticed very strongly at the thing. I noticed containers, all forms of containers. So time containers, like we're going to be doing this from this time to this time. Space containers of like we're doing it in this place. And if you want to do it with us, like come here to this place. Um, like sort like ground rules that people set, like, okay, we're gonna like any sort of thing that structures the format of it. Like we're gonna do 5-minute rounds. Like think about like hot ones or think about like certain like game show formats, they've kind of like they've like structured a very specific field to the point where like what it's going to be like. So like those videos on YouTube where it's like one guy versus 20 girls or whatever.
Right.
That's like a format and that's a format that's spread across many channels because they kind of have like cracked it in that like it creates this specific field dynamic that's like kind of awkward, but
Right.
also really funny to watch and generative. And they've figured out some sort of like orientation of people and time and sound and shit that like makes this thing happen.
Right. What do you think it does?
What do I think?
That
Uh,
like format achieves.
I think it's intentionally awkward. Like the distance of the people is like very far from each other initially, and there's like always a lot of like time where they can see each other but they can't interact, which I think is awkward for people. But like knowing they're going to interact, like I think that's inherently awkward. I think not having nothing in the space that is like distractible. So it's like completely white background, you know? So it's like they can't be like, oh, like nice day, isn't it? Or like they can't like have any crutches. It's just like it's like completely reduced to just their expression
I
with each.
think plays a lot into the like the bonding element too, of like we're in this,
Right,
like you're part of a group. It's like, all right, I might as well like invest in it because I'm part of like this thing.
right.
Or
If you
like not necessarily there's no way out, but like it's like, all right, like we're gonna be together the next 4 hours. Like,
we have to figure this shit out.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like I
I
feel
feel
like
like
the
when you have an out, that just like creates areas where like it's hard to have the bonding click.
this is the problem with texting, right? Is like texting, it's hard to create a container on texting because the other person, like, it's like the red thing kind of says, like, I'm present, but otherwise, like, it's hard to, you don't know you're going to have someone's attention the whole time. So it's hard to know, hey, do I really go into this or is it, what are we doing here?
Hmm. Hmm.
Whereas,
No,
like,
and sometimes it's like people like to force the containers on themselves because they're very much aware of like the impact the container has of like, oh, like let's as a family go on this camping trip.
right, right.
Like
And then the
kids
kid is
can't
like,
like,
look, I can't escape,
yeah,
right? Like, I'm always going to be seen and I don't want to always be seen.
right, right,
I don't want to always be in the container
right.
with these people. That's the interesting thing is that you can really all of this is so obvious in person. Like like how much time someone has, how engaged someone is, like all this stuff is like so obvious and we're trained for millions of years to be able to pick this stuff up. Like if you're sitting down on the couch and I walk into the room like super fast and I'm like, "Hey man, what's good?" And you're like, "Hey," you're like, "Oh, he's doing something, he's going somewhere." He's like a little stressed out, like let him rock. Like he clearly has an objective. I'm just posted here. As opposed to if I texted you, hey, what's good? Then like, where am I? What am I doing? How much time do I have? How interested am I in this conversation? Like all of that data is just like missing, you know?
Mhm.
So it's really easy to have problems. And this kind of loops back. This is kind of a side point, but this loops back to the idea that if we're going to build a society together, the only way to do it is like in person. Because how are you going to, you know what I mean? It's like, here's my plan for a perfect society. Where's your plan? Okay, this is your plan. Okay, let's read it and then send each other Google Docs comments. It's like,
Yeah,
what's happening here?
yeah, yeah.
You kind of have to be in like a playroom and just like be in a
Right,
playroom and just be stuck there and be like, we have to figure this shit out.
right, right. Which definitely, yeah, definitely something that gets lost in the remote world for sure. Is like definitely if you have strong existing bonds, like you can keep it going.
Right.
But it's hard, like you're saying, it's hard to have that like sense of play of like, all right, we're in this room. Like if there's like a silence or there's like some other thing going on, like there's not an easy out.
There's not an easy out. There's like it's sick that you had the tarot deck in your on your side, you know, but like if you didn't, it wouldn't be as real to you.
Hmm.
Thing that
Hmm.
the exercise that we did, you know.
Right.
Like it's almost like you almost need like a dupe. If you the more maybe that's something to add to the equation. The more like I guess that's just the container thing. But the idea that like if your room looked exactly like my room, we'd instantly be like resonating on a different wave right now. And like if you were wearing the same outfit as me and looked exactly like me, there would be like we would probably even in the moments where we disagreed intellectually, be more like willing to like make it up.
You think?
Okay, well, let's think about it. If I was wearing a full costume and you were wearing a full costume and we had the same exact conversation, I think it would give the moments where we're disagreeing intellectually, it would make it more like less serious.
Yeah, totally.
Even if we were just wearing nurses' outfits or something, like not the full outfit doesn't make it as, I guess maybe the outfit does affect it though. Like if those people are gonna disagree versus if they're not gonna disagree.
What's your point?
My point is like, my point is that resonance is built on sameness to some degree.
Right, right. Totally.
Same space, same look, same this, same.
I mean, because it's just an indicator of like you're like, oh, this person's wearing something that like I wear. This person does this thing I do. Then all of a sudden you have access to so many more avenues.
Right.
Like you know what to talk about because you know that they'll know what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
You can kind of go out on a limb because you don't have to like whip everything else up for
Yeah,
it. Just like to get to the point really fast.
right, right,
We've been able to jump over. I mean, the points where we slowed down is like when we had to be like, wait, what did you mean by postmodernism? What did I mean by,
right,
Whereas
right,
we both know what I1 is, we're off to the races.
right.
Okay, here's a question. When is the time that you were very effective at creating a field
What
recently?
kind of field?
Um, the kind of field you're good at creating.
Huh. I mean, I definitely enjoy the element of like bringing groups together when I can. And I think to some extent, when you're inviting a bunch of different groups and you're going to like even like a concert, like I don't know, we went to Solomon,
Mhm.
like that creates a field of like, hey, we're all investing to like spend our time this next couple hours. Like we all like want to do this. And all of a sudden, like everyone's like kind of bought into like getting to know each other.
Mhm.
I mean, that's like pretty trivial, but I think that applies to most things. And like that's like a barrier that you want enough context, I think is important. But in
Context.
the sense of let's say you're building let's say you're building a field, you're hosting a party,
Okay.
you rent out
That's
a
a
bar,
here.
you rent out a bar.
Okay.
If there's no context of who each other are, like there's sometimes where it blends super great.
Right.
There are other times where it's a little too big and that like you see just a complete divide.
Right.
And
Right.
like I'm trying to
Field
think
or
what's
like
the difference, right? It's like I mean a
fight.
middle school dance, all the girls are on one side, all the guys on one side.
Right.
Like what changes the sauce where it gets merged and it blends well.
I think it's someone like you and you or me changes the sauce. Like someone who's willing to like be a fool and kind of like break the field. Like,
Well, the problem is they have their own fields, right? So it's like I have like you put them in a common space, but they're still more bound to their field than they are to the like the common field, right?
right. But
And so
oh, that's okay. That's
you
interesting.
need I think you need some sort of sense of like they're in the space, but they need some sort of sense of like common objective or common like they need like some other force that's greater than their like individual fields
Yes.
to like break it apart.
That's what music does a lot of times. Cause like
Right. You can do that.
if there's no music, we're just going to be talking to the people that we have resonance with. But then if the same song comes on and a girl over there is dancing to ABBA and I'm dancing to ABBA, like we can resonate because we're both the most energetic people dancing to ABBA, even if we don't know each other in context.
Well, it's like music can add to it, but it has to be there has to be some sense of like not eh, I don't know. This is where I'm a little bit lost is like there like where we were talking about rarity earlier. Like for
Right.
example, when I was in New Zealand, we went to this one silent disco and obviously silent disc, say what you will about silent discos, but this one was pretty fun. Like there was like everyone had headphones and it's like there's an A or B or C, right? And it shows a color of green, blue,
Oh,
or
color?
red. So you can see what other people are listening to.
Huh?
And there's some sense of fields that get created from like what people are listening to. So
Yeah.
like there's people in red and you switch to red, like you're all of a sudden like vibing with them and like there's like some sense of like shared reality there that instantly gets built.
Even in the same physical space.
Right, in the same space. And so I think one thing you're saying is like, let's say this party example we were using earlier. There, I don't know. I think just the shared music alone, like maybe, but
But it's the
like
reactions to the shared
I
music.
think there needs to be something like there needs to be like one more step.
It's the reaction to the music. Like, for example, if a song comes on, if Fiend comes on, think about the field that gets created instantly.
Right.
It's a male field, like instantly.
Right.
If Fiend comes on and you hear it, what's gonna happen is I'm gonna look at you, you're gonna look at me, all the other guys are gonna look at us, right? And then we're gonna lose our minds and we're gonna have no idea what else is going on anywhere else.
Is it as effective when it's everyone though? Or is it more effective the fact that it's a portion of the people?
Okay,
I guess you go to like you go to a trap concert and you're like, this is like,
right. Everyone is
oh.
down.
But it's over like one shared thing that you know very well.
Yeah. I mean, at Integral,
So
there
is
was,
it not like a quantity point person, but it's like a depth?
yeah. I think it's something like that because like at Integral, everyone there has spent a lot of time like reading about this stuff, thinking about this stuff. So you've kind of made a lot of investment already, and and
But I
like
guess going back to that silent disco example, like if I was on one channel and there was like two other people on it, I'd just be, it's like the scarcity still plays a role for sure.
you're saying you would
Probably
what?
I
If,
said the scarcity or like the rarity of the fact that there's like only other two people on this channel. If I hop on that, like I get way more hyped.
but there are definitely scenarios in where like you and I would not like let's say there are two DJs playing in a space. Like Burning Man's a great example. There are camps where there are five people outside dancing and there's like one DJ mixing, or there's like an art cart where there's like two people dancing, and
Yeah.
we blow right past those and go to the place that's the most pyrotechnic, loudest, most lasers, most craziness, right? And then we try to get to the closest to the spout of nectar at that place, right? Like we're trying to get as close to the artist as we possibly can. I think that's not a rarity thing. That's like a everyone's here and we're the rare ones at the place that everyone's at.
But in terms of bonding with other people though, like I think it's more likely for me to find someone that I'm like bonding with at the one with five people than it is with.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. If you're trying to bond with a new person, yeah.
Well, isn't that where we're talking in context of like what's the equation of
Oh,
connection?
yeah. I guess I had I it floated to the to where I was just thinking what creates like strong fields in general.
Hmm.
I think yeah, if we're thinking about between two people, yeah, I think rarity is a big rarity. If it's between us two people, I think rarity is huge. Rarity is
Hmm.
always huge. Like, yeah. Like when I see people who know Dark Mama in real life, I'm just instantly hyped on that
Right.
because I'm like, oh, they know what I know. Or if someone like has strong I7 or strong I2, like, but the thing is that from I think I get a big kick out of just like what I get a kick out of like maybe this is a bit of a different topic. So if you're not interested in it, bring us back. I get a I get a big kick just out of raw, just power and just like intensity. Like if someone is super into like I won, I'll be hype on that just because of the fact that they think it's amazing. Like that's cool to me, you know? And then I'll be
Mhm.
like, oh, this is like an I won thing happening here. And then I can show up and be the cheerleader for that. And they're always hyped to have me, whatever it is. You
Mhm.
know, like if I see someone at a concert who's like I can tell is experiencing it through an I2 lens, usually they want to be left alone, so you don't bother them. But sometimes people are experiencing it through like an I4 lens and they're looking around like, yo, did you hear that? Did you see that? And then to be the person that's like, I did see that. That wasn't, like
Right,
there's
right.
a great feeling in that.
That last example is more through like you mean like common feeling, right?
Yeah, I guess that's well, it's like they've had an experience and they're looking for who else is on that same like radio wave.
Right, right,
And I can switch my radio frequency to like be on their frequency and instantly like tap into that.
right. But I'd say that's probably a pretty rare, a more rare trait at least. I
Yeah, I guess.
definitely feel that whoever has like a similar stack of me, like I get along with in a different way of like, yeah, I mean, it's just that feeling of like, oh, they like understand, like I'm feeling this, like they get that. And it becomes very easy to be like friends with someone that has a similar stack in that way.
Yeah. What have we said that our resonance points are?
What, two?
Yeah, probably aesthetic intelligence,
Four? I
intelligence.
mean, I think primarily those.
Yeah. I mean, we're thinking a good amount, maybe I6 in there, but I don't know.
Right. Well, I think I mean, there's like archetype.
Sage. Yeah, that's more the sage.
Yeah.
Yeah, we resonate on the sage, we resonate on the fool, we resonate on the magician, we resonate on the animal, if you're feeling it.
Definitely fool, magician, sage.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your relationship to the animal?
Um, I think it's not something I I don't seek it out all the time, but like I enjoy the spurts where it comes to me.
Right.
It feels fake to seek it out too much to me.
It feels
It feels like not fake, but it feels like you can't like you it's almost paradoxical to like seek out the animal too much. Otherwise it's like not the animal, you know?
yeah. I guess the way that I feel the animal is just it just takes over.
Right. So exactly. So if like you're seeking it out, then it's
Yeah, then it's not the animal
not the animal.
because
Right.
right. Yeah.
So that's why you're saying what's your relationship? And I'm like, well, I can't seek it out.
Right, right, right. When's the last time it possessed you?
Um, I definitely feel like playing like if you're playing some sport and you have like a close game, like playing basketball or something like that, and it's like it's really tight and you're just like giving it your all because like you just want to win. Like you just made the choice, like I want to win. Like it's because it's just like more fun to care, you know.
You wouldn't
Like
consider
there's
that
some people that have the winning spirit of like I hate losing. It feels bad for them to lose. For me, I don't really get that so much.
right.
But for me, it's like there's significantly more enjoyment to care than to not care.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I might as well care. And in this case, I'm caring. So then like the person that cares would like try hard.
Is that not
And
just
there's an element of trying hard where it kind of turns off, where it's like you're like, I don't know, you're getting a point or you're doing something, and it's like the reaction like kind of takes over.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
like there's like an animal that comes outside of like
Yeah.
getting fired up.
Okay, help me. Do you think because some of the stuff you're saying, like specifically around like a specific objective being completed, like winning, reminds me of the warrior.
But it's like after
Yeah, I see what you're saying though. It comes out on its own.
right,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
like in like an uncontrollable way.
Yeah. I
where you
feel
just like
that.
want to release.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like this thing
The
arises.
warrior enables the animal, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I think one of the fastest ways into the animal is probably through the warrior, I would guess.
Yeah,
I mean, my, yeah, I don't think it's really easy to get, it's by definition, it's not easy to get into the animal from the caregiver, which is across, yeah, right, which is across it, or the sage is not going to get you into the animal. You know, the the innocent probably isn't going to get you into the animal. The explorer could start to get you in the animal. It is close, and the lover could definitely get you into the animal, and the muse could get you into the animal.
right,
I think it's in it. I think it's in the right place.
right. Yeah, totally. Um, just like looking at the time,
Yeah,
I definitely want to hear kind of like what your was your biggest takeaway then from like the whole conference, the idea of fields and the idea of that kind of this idea of like actually going. I mean, it sounds trivial when you say it, of like actually like having to do the things and like not just
that's
getting
art,
stuck in the conceptual mind.
but it's surprisingly not as done as you would think. Um, yeah, I would say if I had to rattle off the top couple things that really stuck out to me, for the first thing is probably, which is something I haven't mentioned yet, which is the value of elders and the value of transgenerational relationships. I think that was really special for me as someone who's been on this path on my own and with people my age for a long time. But I've been reading people that are older than me, reading people that are long dead, but to actually be with people in person who are way further on the path than me, was beautiful. And to be witnessed by those people and to be corrected by those people and to be guided by those people is super rejuvenating because you don't have to be the father all the time. You know,
Mhm.
you can be the kid again. You can be like, let me just learn, let me explore. You don't have to be like, I'm the most knowledgeable homie here. I have to like hold it down. You know,
Right,
someone else can kind of hold you.
right.
And yeah, I think of the
I
father
think
as,
it also just like gave you access more to the future as well.
what do you mean by that?
I think that's one thing you can definitely access being around like people that are older, like mentors or something like that. Is like you can get
Yeah,
sense of like, oh, this is where this is headed for me.
yes.
Like not the same, but like I see this like path.
Yeah, it really crystallizes the trajectory. I think like I'm excited, like I get very excited by trajectories for better or worse, and seeing people who are further down this trajectory and I like it, it's like a really affirming sign, you know?
Mhm.
I think one of the things that really scared me from some of the previous worldviews I was on was looking at people who were further down, looking at the elders of those lineages and being like, oh man, like I don't want to be there, you know?
Right.
And so having gone on my own path and started to walk my own path and to see people at the end of this path that I am excited about where they're at, that's like a really reaffirming
Mhm.
thing. So elders and just learning those dynamics again, learning how to not like how to present yourself well, but also still recognizing that they can see through me. I'm a kid. Like they know I'm not like bawling right now. You know, like those dynamics are cool to feel into. The concept of fields was big. You know, of course, this idea of structuring fields, holding fields, creating containers, and the ease by which that can actually happen, like how simple it can actually be, how to do that. Um, but that it really does take two to tango. And like I saw that the reason I think those fields like structured so fast is because like everyone there was like kind of down, you know? So when someone starts being like starts field structuring, everyone's like, oh, we're field structuring. And they're like there. As opposed to like I think that's a big part of it is like the people were actually skilled. So their
Being
intention
aware of what's going on.
aware of what's going on. Yeah. Um, Another big insight I got was if one of us gets it, we all get it. And that kind of relates to the fields, but it was specifically something someone was talking about while we were doing a group meditation. And, you know, they were saying everyone try as hard as you can to like be as present as you can, you know, but also be open to someone else cracking it before you and just receiving that boon in the field.
Mm.
And I actually felt like someone literally picked me up from under the armpits and flew me into the heavens, like halfway through, because I was just sitting there and I was as present as I could be, I was as open as I could be, but I could really feel like, wow, because I meditate frequently, and I could tell, wow, I'm getting help here that's not just mine, and that was a really beautiful feeling.
Yeah, and I feel like that's definitely a thing in general is like if someone in your field or someone in your squad, someone in your group does something, it reinvigorates you to show you like it's possible, like I can do it too.
Yes, totally. I mean, this is like the 4 minute mile, right?
Right.
Like nobody could do it until one person did it, and then the next day someone else does it, and the next day someone else does it, and it's like, what the fuck just happened here?
Yeah.
Like you're saying 2 days ago no one could do it, and now 100 people did it in a day. Like it's literally because one person was able to do it, it changes the field.
Right, right.
And I
Totally.
think that made me hopeful for what's coming, in the sense that if there's one society, if there's one culture, if there's one group of people that figure out kind of what future civ sort of integral thing could look like, that serves as a beacon for other people to feel motivated to try and to attempt it. So that was
Mhm.
exciting. Um, there was this idea that what is healthy is alive, or what is healthy is always unfolding, because by nature of it being, like, to be healthy, it has to actually be alive and growing. Like nothing that's static is actually healthy, because it's not alive, it's not able to adapt to what's actually going on. So it may be too specific for a certain environment or a certain time, and it may not be relevant anymore. That which is healthy is like relevant now, which
Mhm.
means it's alive. And given the fact that it's alive, it needs to be given life, or it needs to be sustained. And so this is values, cultures, fields, anything like this, relationships, anything that's in the intersubjective space between us. What they would say in the lower left quadrant, the we space, the thing that's happening between us right now. Like this call is investing in this thing that's alive, which is this relationship. It's investing, we're breathing life into certain ideas that are now going to be more prevalent in our minds because we've taken the time to think about them,
Mhm.
right? Like like things on their own, like, will die if you don't, like values, worldviews, stuff like that. Let's take Christianity, for example. Christianity is still alive today because there's so many people today who are breathing life into that idea, and like who are going to go somewhere on Sunday, and some guy is going to put his sweet green that he ate that morning that converts into ATP. He's going to be taking that energy and blasting it out as the gospel to a group of people in 2024, right?
Mhm.
In a lineage. And the same thing is true for whatever integral is. Like it literally just takes people showing up and breathing life into it and talking about it and being there for it that makes it alive.
Right,
And doesn't, like, just because you wrote it and put it in a book doesn't mean it's alive.
right, right.
Someone has
Cool.
to read it, embody it, all that,
Right.
speak it out. So we got to actually breathe life into the stuff out. Um, yeah, and I think one of the other big takeaways was just the how connection, it relates to the fields too, but fields are much more easily created when both parties or all parties feel safe. Like nervous system calmness is kind of the first step of establishing intimacy.
Right.
Intimacy is kind of what a field is just like a we that is happening between people.
Right. Because
And
you have to have the space for the openness.
yeah, and being able to literally hold someone in your attention, in your gaze, not being distracted, not being afraid, being able to actually show up and just look at them and be with them, like that almost creates a field more than anything else that you can say or you can do. Like in modern society, we use all these shorthands, like, oh, we're wearing the same thing, we're doing the same thing. But actually, if two people actually just come in like radical presence and openness to each other, there's something that just starts happening between them, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. So learning how to train the nervous system actually just to drop down and to be more present. It's hard to do digitally, but in person it can be. It's easier to do.
Mhm. How are the ways you think you capture that? Is like a lot of it like kind of the cadence at which you talk or the like amount of silence you allow, I guess, or
Yeah,
body language, like open versus closed.
yeah. I think the first thing is just eye contact. Eye contact creates a field, I think. That's I think also why this is hard because I'm looking at you, but the camera is like up here. So it's like, where am I? But in person, when you're making eye contact with someone, that instantly establishes a field, you know, where stuff can start to become transmitted through that field, through the eye contact.
Right.
So that's, I would say, the first thing. The second
It's
thing I
funny, like eye contact can transmit like different messages too, based on the
would,
content.
totally, it transmits anything you're feeling comes through the eye contact, right? Fear, love, lust, excitement,
Right. Danger.
danger, right? And there's a difference in resonance, right? Like if one person is like super excited and one person is like, not into it, you get a sense of what's going on in that field. Um, and then so the first thing I would say is eye contact. The second thing I would say is breath and the synchronization of the breaths.
Hmm.
And the breath is a stand-in for kind of nervous system or arousal state in terms of like active versus passive, or in terms of like resting versus like excited.
Hmm.
Um, and this is what I said. One of the realizations I had at TED too. This is just saying that in a different way, which is the bodies talk first, and then the hearts talk, and then the minds kind of chuck words at each other last. But first thing that's happening is the body,
What do you mean the minds talk before the
or the bodies talk before the mind.
you said, well, it's body,
Heart,
oh,
mind.
heart. Sorry. What do you mean by heart?
Heart is like the affect. Like for example, if you and I are at a concert hall and I'm completely still and you're completely still, like we're resonating. We're like, this isn't moving me that much.
Right.
But if I'm completely
That
still,
body?
what?
Wouldn't that be body?
Yeah, 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 body's first.
Right.
And then, but for example, if our body is the same, but I'm like blissfully like just soaking in this music, and you're like the bodies are the same, but the like heart is different. The affect is different.
Right.
Right? But if both of us are like vibing, or both of us are like, it's like body, heart. And then if I turn to you and I go like, yo, this shit is ass. And you're like, yeah, this shit is so ass. Then we're like, you know, but if I turn to you and I'll be like, bro, she just shouldn't have left me. Like, I'm a good guy. Then you'd be like, I thought you were down bad over these guys like boofing it.
Right. Right.
So it's like, but you were kind of resonating before that until he like screwed it up and you realized he was actually tapping into some other source.
Right. Right.
But it's
Oh,
like if I'm at a conference, like you see this a lot with famous people and fans. It's like the famous person is kind of like calm, vibing, like not worried about anything. And then the fan runs up and the fan's like geeking and is like, oh my God, sign my thing. They're instantly not resonating
right.
because it's like clearly this is a way bigger deal for you than it is for me.
Right.
As opposed to like two celebrities seeing each other on the red carpet. Like both of them are chill.
Yeah. It's like,
And
what's
it's
good?
or
Yeah.
like, you know,
All right, bro. Just checking the time now. Think I gotta head off.
awesome. Well, thank you so very much, honestly, for doing this with me. I think we're learning, we're playing, I think that
Yeah,
we can
bro.
only go up from here and figure more out from here.
Definitely. Definitely.
Okay, Emily.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Soon.
All
Bye.
right. See you.
Still recording. All right. Well, anyone who came with us on that journey, thank you. Now it's time. We're gonna get better at this. We're gonna learn more, but this is round one. So on to the next. Be well.